Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is What's Hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner.
So we're doing a quarterly book review starting Q4 on the podcast. And before you joined, Merlin, Ashley and I were brainstorming which book we should pick and read.
And we think we have one.
Yeah, it was Ashley's idea.
Well, I brought it up as an option and Liz was a fan.
And you really like that author.
I do. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the author. I've mentioned her before on the podcast.
Okay, so which book are we reading?
Liz, do you want to tell them?
No, you tell
them. So we decided on a book called Get Your S Together. Are we swearing on the podcast? I guess it depends on.
If it's a title of a book, I think it's okay.
Yeah. Get your crap together. Maybe that's what I'll say.
Get your shit together.
If I search on Amazon for that, I got to be able to find it. Okay.
And I thought it was a good option because you need help sometimes getting your shit together, Merlin.
That seems fair.
We also don't really think you're going to read it, but you need it the most.
So you can learn when we do the review on it what you could have learned reading it.
Great. I'll find a synopsis online somewhere. Or maybe I'll surprise you and I'll read the book and I'll come back with detailed and in-depth notes.
You know, if you want to threaten me, you should probably threaten me with something I actually believe.
Wow. All right. It's not harsh at all. Okay.
Sorry, Merlin.
Who's the author of the book?
Sarah Knight.
Okay. Yes, I remember you mentioning her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she has 5 books, so we picked one of the 5.
Okay, great.
So we have our book.
We have our book. Yeah, come back and hear our feedback or hear what Merlin could have learned. Sorry, Merlin, I'm giving you such a hard time.
Hashtag making fun of Merlin.
Right. Do we have something else we'd like to talk about today?
We have our topic, which is
verbally abuse me.
Basically getting your shit together for a go live. So checklists for go lives or projects that you're on and why you should have them and what you put on them. So I think we've probably all witnessed go lives that aren't well organized too, and kind of the nightmares or headaches that can come out of not being organized.
And I think you said something there that's like really critical, is that a go live is not just like that first implementation. It's like anytime you have any sort of major update to the system, I think some people are like, oh, this is just an update or just a change. Like we don't have to follow the same steps that we did, with something bigger or the initial implementation. So Liz, like I think, it could just be a project. I don't want to say
definitely
projects. Yeah. So
I think any sort of change or enhancement. Yeah. That, especially if it's substantial and has like a major impact on end users, or if it's new functionality to like a new set of end users. Like it doesn't have to be to your point, like your first implementation.
I mean, because I even do something on like the releases, you know what I mean? Like I do a call with all my end users because, it's nothing I change. And sometimes the changes aren't so drastic. I mean, we talked about it recently, how like the release 2 is not like that. There's not much coming, but just because there is any sort of change in the system, I still get my users together. I record videos, I send out a bunch of stuff. So I think it could be big or small.
So it sounds like communication is definitely important.
Oh yeah, I guess if we're going to start making a list for everyone, like our top 10 list here.
Yeah, maybe we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'd say, communication is like the big one because, even if it's, I would rather over communicate than under communicate, right? Like just wait until the end. So I started prepping my users for the release like months ago, just saying, hey, it's coming, don't forget.
Yeah.
And communication might be different depending on who you're working with too. So like I do videos because I know that my users are not going to read something,
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, knowing your
And
audience, tailoring it to your audience is important. Go ahead, Merlin.
I was going to say, as somebody who works at a dynamics consulting firm, I can probably communicate a lot less than Ashley can, because I have a reasonable expectation that everybody at my company is pretty comfortable in the system and they probably already know the features that are coming. So I could probably just turn it on one day and be like, all right, hey, by the way, I turned on wave 2. Hope everybody's cool with that. Whereas if my users were different, I would not be able to get away with that.
Which is what I heard you did do at your company for wave 2,
yeah.
Merlin.
Yeah, definitely did. Yeah, just turned it on. It's like, we'll see if anything breaks.
You have the luxury of doing that. That's not the normal situation. I would argue, even if you were at a larger partner, like there's still going to be enough people that aren't in the weeds, like consultants, that you would still want to communicate on it.
That's very true. And that's actually, I think, from a previous partner that was much larger at which I was employed, they didn't do much communication either, under the assumption that, well, everybody knows everything about CRM. So why would I need to communicate anything? But then you forget about all of the folks that you've hired over time to run your finance team and your operations department.
Those
and
dumb
like
salespeople.
Those terrible salespeople.
Which you both were on that team. So I love that Liz says that.
Oh, yeah. I had to train the salespeople so that they could get their certification. So I know how bad they were.
That's amazing.
Right. And as the technical salesperson, I had to train Liz so that she could train the salespeople. So
that's just false information.
Yeah, this has gotten a bad vibe, guys, real quick.
Got a little spicy. But yes, that was a problem. They would like release new updates or new features and not actually tell anybody about it. And the larger the organization gets, or the more complex the processes are, then like, okay, sure, I know how CRM works, but you just deployed this whole new process. I don't know what you had in mind for how I'm supposed to use that process. So like, where's the communication to me so that I'm putting in the data that you expect to be there?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we kind of started at the end though. Like, I know you communicate throughout, but like we're kind of starting from like what you would do at the end of a go live. Cause I mean, just such a simple thing is that I make sure to always do is test. It's not at all the most exciting thing, but obviously you have to make sure somewhere when you said like, oh, what if something breaks? Like, we'll just deal with it later. Like, that's not what you can do in a lot of implementations or go lives.
It's true.
So like testing and having end users like actually run through all the crazy processes and crazy things they click on and you never know. Because, I'm only going to do what I know I've told them to do to test, but who knows what they actually do when they're in the system.
That's a good point. Like, do you guys actually think you in UAT the end users test like the non-test scenarios that are given to them, or do you think they just wait for it to go live and like use it in real life and then you find that stuff?
I feel like it has to be after go live. Maybe it's different if it's like phase 2, phase 6, and they've already been using the system for a while, then they might take some shortcuts in UAT. But like, especially early on, or for a new process, like the users aren't gonna, they don't know it well enough to know how they're gonna try to shortcut it. And so they're just gonna be like blindly following the script that you gave them. Like, okay, click on this, click, then do this. Okay, click, and then do that. Okay, click. Okay, it worked.
Yeah, so my test scripts were less like step by step. It was more like, do what you do to create an opportunity. How would you create an account and go through that process? Because I mean, by then though, it wasn't a first go live, right? Like I could see that, like, especially on a new implementation. But after that, I tried to do less like click here, and just say, take your steps to do this action item that you do, and then take a screenshot if you run into an issue or it's not what you expected it to turn out to be. Because then if they're doing something crazy and not doing something I told them to do, we find that out.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice.
But it doesn't work for everybody.
Writing the script.
Absolutely. It doesn't work for everybody, but I've worked at some organizations where I've just said, create an account, however you do it. So yeah, the time savings on that. I can't imagine writing test scripts. I think that's why I probably started doing that years ago, was that I was like, I am not writing test scripts.
It's true. Added benefits though. So thinking about this from a checklist perspective, write tests would be perhaps an item on the checklist. I guess.
Or testing scenarios. Like, because even if you don't do it step by step, it could just be like, this is the scenario you need tested out.
Right. And then on your checklist, you would have the list of all the different scenarios you want to make sure somebody runs through, because those are the processes that are being impacted by whatever the change is.
Mm-hmm. And that would obviously come before the testing. So I really do like how we're going backwards on our list here.
It's a good backwards list.
We got to stick with going backwards now. We've committed.
So before you get to that step, I'm trying to think.
I know that documentation will fall in there somewhere. Definitely before the test scripting. And documentation can be done multiple ways. And I know we've talked about this before, like, 10 years ago, it was creating a detailed Word document that was 45 pages long with every single thing that you did in that update. Now I would say that my documentation is literally in DevOps, or I use Jira, and it's just tracking like, hey, this is the change that was made, my comments on it, what we did to get it implemented. So, I mean, I think documentation has changed, but I do think that some sort of documentation of what you did is valuable, just depending on what you are requiring.
I think that's fair. Do you still do like a cheat sheet update for the end users, or do you expect that they're going to look in Jira to see what you changed?
Oh yeah, so that's where the communication comes, and I do the
Okay.
video, right? So like,
oh sure,
the documentation, I guess, is for me, or if like I left and somebody was like, oh my gosh, what was this crazy girl thinking when she did this? They could go into Jira and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna undo all this. So I guess it's more for like the people like me that. Okay. The back end people. Yeah, no, I would never expect an end user to go unless they were testing. Like I would put my test scripts into Jira and assign it to them.
That makes sense. I don't know. It's funny when I think about like a checklist for go lives, I'm thinking about like the set of things that I have to do to like deploy a solution.
Yeah, I had very technical, like granular things on my list.
Oh, let's hear them, Liz.
Like import the solution and then check the users on flows and workflows, and then like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not going to be the same for each project or implementation. Like it depends on what you're deploying, right? So like the first thing I do is like anything you have to do manual within the project, like take note of that, because you're gonna have to do it manually again at go live. So creating business units, if you have master data where you have like these reference entities and you need to make sure you have the right list of whatever in your production system. And then like integrations too, like I'm working on a Zoom info integration on the project that I'm on, and like it only connect, like if it's something can only connect to one environment, like are you connecting it to prod now, or like SharePoint or Outlook? Like are you really going to turn on the Outlook integration in a sandbox environment? Are you going to wait for prod? So all that sort of stuff, I feel like ends up on like a more tactical go live checklist.
Before I respond, I think your dog also wants to be included and has some items prepared today, Liz.
He's super barky this afternoon because we're not recording at our normal time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I tried to bribe them with food and make them sleepy, but it doesn't really work.
Catnip. Well, it works for cats. I don't know if there's something like that for dogs.
Not really.
No. So something you said there that I think is really important, and we've talked about this before, is like your solution size as well. So considering what should go into each solution, like I automatically put Power Automate flows into its own solution regardless. And then just depending on the order that things need to go in, you might break up your solution because this has to be done before this item can go in. So to your point, Liz, I think that just solution management in general, breaking things up, putting them together where they make sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just fell into this trap myself not that long ago. I moved a solution from my development environment into a production environment. And then I was like, okay, like it's ready to go, like go check it out. And then after I'd sent that email to the user, I was like, no, wait, this isn't going to work. I need to create all the products that I created in dev that I didn't create in production. So then I had to go into production, like clean out the products and add the new products. And then I was like, I feel like I missed something else. And like, had to go back in a couple of circles and be like, and I forgot to do that, and I forgot to do that. And that's why it's important to have a list of all of the things that you've done so that you can do them again. Because I hadn't done that.
Happens to all of us though. Like I've been there.
Yeah, that's when you're like, I really should have made a list.
And your list
True.
is going to be, like you said, Liz, your list is going to be different every time. It might have different, like, but it should in theory have like the same buckets of stuff, but like the actual steps are going to be different. So you can't like reuse the same list over and over, which is unfortunate. I would love to just put something in my OneNote and just use it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some common things, but it definitely has to be tailored. And some things you just don't care about until production either. Like I'm thinking about personal user settings and like setting those up. Like until I get to prod, I mean, maybe you do it for UAT, but like you really don't need to set those in your lower environments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the records per page and kind of advanced find mode and things like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I think it's important, like even if it seems simple, well, because your task can still fall into the same like overall buckets, right? So like you've got I have to move solutions, and so that kind of ties into your whatever your solution management theory or philosophy is. But then you have to make sure you have all the solutions that you need, and then think about, you know, the data that you might have to change by hand, like, oh, I need to update the list of products, or I have, you know, a lookup table that's only being used for lookups, but I need to make sure that the lookup values have been populated in there, or, you know, whatever else those things are. And then like some simple testing scenarios that you might want to make sure to walk through after you've moved stuff. As long as you've got the same big buckets, then you're right, the details will always change. But because I didn't create the list that said, is there any data that you have to recreate? It didn't occur to me that, of course, there's data that I have to recreate. And so I would have put that on my list if I had had something to prompt me to remember it.
Yeah. So where do you guys, how do you store your list? Where do you write it down?
You guys are going to hate me. Usually a Post-it note.
You would say that.
But I think that it depends on so if it's just me, right? Like I work on so much stuff just by myself, like that could work. But when I'm working with a partner consultant, you know, on something, usually it's somewhere like in a team that we have access, like, you know, we have a shared team, like it goes somewhere and there's like a step or to-do item. I've used Excel in the past, wouldn't say that I would still probably continue to do that, but Excel is like great for like a lot of stuff. And so yeah, definitely used Excel.
I mean, I use OneNote.
Of course you do.
Of course I do.
Liz is totally judging our answers. Like totally I knew that was coming.
I know. And
I could have guessed both of those.
I'm sure she's going to tell us what system we ought to be using.
You could take a guess. What's like, I put it on Azure DevOps.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Planner.
It's going to be 80-hour planner. I like OneNote because it's easy to just write the list out and I can put the little checkbox thing in front of it. So then when it's done, I can just check.
What if you needed to assign out the task to someone else?
Well, then I can put their name after a dash at the end of the item.
And does that notify them?
No, but I share the OneNote with them. I'd be like, here's the shared page. I've seen this work very effectively with very complex lists. I feel like the advantage there is that you make sure that the list is in order. Like if you need to make sure that things need to be in order, like if I put stuff into like a planner or a DevOps, then it's really easy to reorder things. Well, what if I don't want those things to get reordered? Just put it in a OneNote. It's easy. And then anybody could just look at the OneNote and be like, here's where we're at. And we're waiting on Liz to finish her solution import. And the rest of us are just sitting there waiting for that to be done.
I'm sure that works.
Not saying it's perfect.
Not judging.
But I think that Liz, she's judging. Like I said earlier, so I said I do things a lot on my own, right? Like I do rollouts, upgrades, updates, whatever, and it's just me. So something like what Merlin you're talking about could work really well. If you're working like with a team of people, so internally you don't have just an admin, you have developers, you have solution architects, you have BAs, you have an admin. I mean, if you have all of those people, just let's forget the partner side for a second, just internally you have all that. something like DevOps or Jira, I use Jira, like would make a lot more sense because you could assign things, people could get alert, you can tag them, you can like, I totally get that, Liz. I've just never been in a situation or on a team where you had to organize it because it was all me. So
That's fair.
yeah. So have you used DevOps in that way, Liz? Like,
yeah, we used it
and what have
for
you
my
done?
last go live. I had like a junior functional helping with some of this stuff. So I kind of made the list and then I assigned most of it to her. It worked
awesome.
great. Yeah.
It's good. Was it easy to see where you were at in the process?
I mean, you mark them complete when they're done.
Well, I mean, yeah,
That's
but like,
so passive aggressive.
I mean, could you tell like, okay, we're, I don't know, 3 items away from this go, no go decision point or something like
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think I can't remember what item type I used. I think it was a user story, and then I just did tasks. Like I would just pull up that user story and look at the list of related items and see what was still open.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that makes
pretty basic, pretty easy. It was not overly complex either. Like we had maybe 10 or 15 things max. So it's not like I had a list of 100 things that had all these dependencies and like it was not complex. It was just a basic, go live implementation.
So I know this is like totally moving towards the DevOps conversation, but I have based on what something Merlin said, like, can you make sure that certain things happen in an order? Or do you, because like in Jira, we use it like there's a numbering thing in there and then you can sort everything by it. So like this has to happen before this can. I just didn't know if DevOps had something similar.
I did not have to do that. So I don't know. Honestly, I've not ever tried to order it or like make things dependent on each other. It could be in there. I just haven't ever looked for it.
Sounds like
feel
maybe
like there
we should
must
have
be-
go ahead, Marilyn.
I was gonna say there must be a dependency. In fact, there is a dependency thing. You can set up like parent-child relationships.
Yeah, but does that enforce the order of like completion? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know either.
I think it
Maybe
might be
we should
homework
have
for our next.
I know, so maybe we should have a DevOps conversation
Ooh.
and come with these answers.
Perhaps we should. No, the reason that I'm defending OneNote so vehemently is that I have seen the last time that I saw like a really complete checklist for something to go live, it was an on-prem to cloud migration process. And there were about 50 different steps that had to happen because there was a whole bunch of integrated systems and integrated processes. And like this thing had to be turned off and this portal site had to be redirected to like all these different dependencies. And the PM in that situation was using a OneNote, and she had all the things, and then she would copy all the things to like the next iteration of tests. And then if more tasks needed to be added, then she'd add the more tasks. And then everybody sort of collaborated on that OneNote. And so at any point you could see, okay, like here's where we're at because all these things have been done. And now we're waiting on this person who's responsible for this thing. And it was all in OneNote. And I'm sure that it could have been done more effectively in a better system. But it did work out pretty well. And let her sort of on each test, she would just copy the whole tab and make like the next iteration and then make any tweaks or modifications. She put benchmarks in there, like this process runs for 4.5 hours. So like we need to accommodate for that in the timeline. I don't know. So
Can I just comment that I wish I was that organized? Like that sounds like a true skill that I do not have.
Right. Yeah.
I think for a project like that, you kind of have to be to a degree, like maybe not timing of things, but like at least the order you can't really mess up.
It's true. There was a lot of thought that went into that planning process and many test iterations to make sure that it was going to work.
It's impressive.
I could have used that when I moved in 2016 on-prem to D365 on-prem. That was still, I think I've talked about this before. That was still to this day the worst. It made me question everything.
I think it traumatized you.
It did. It really traumatized me. Like I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back on-prem. Not that I'd want to, but it's just, yeah, no, that definitely. But we had I don't even remember us having a checklist. I'm not gonna lie. Or if my partner did, they didn't share it. we just knew certain things had to go in order, and we had all these add-ins, you know, like plug in like easy territory, things like that, where it like had to be switched at the right time. And yeah, so no, it was all just up here, which, and I pointed at my head when, if you're just listening. And so it's like, how do you keep that straight? So I've definitely learned my lesson on that.
Yeah, I've gone through those upgrades. It's a lot easier if you've got a checklist. It really is.
So I didn't really learn about the checklisting until I worked at a partner. I'm not going to lie. So like as an end user, I kind of just always were like, oh, these are the things. But Merlin, I'd run into the situation that you did. Like, okay, I'm done. And then you find out like 3 minutes later, oh crap, I need to move this too. Or like, I need to add this data. So it was when I worked at a partner and they were like, all right, let's make our checklist. And I was like, what? They're like, oh, well, yeah, these are all the steps that we have to take to do our go live. And this is what you're going to do. And this is what the developer is going to do. And this is at the time you're going to do that. And so I have to be honest with you, I don't think it's something that a lot of end users actually formally think of. I'm not going to lie.
Believe that.
Yeah. I want to add something there. So like you both have commented like, oh, I'm done. And then you realize later on that you're not actually done. Like there's something else manual to be done. And my point is like, test it yourself. Like I think, and I've done this too. Like I've been like, oh yeah, like I made this change. I know it will work because this is super basic and I've done it like a million times. But like you still should always confirm that it works the way you expect it to before going to the end user, the customer, whether that's external or internal, and being like, hey, it's ready for you to review, because no matter how experienced you are, you might have forgotten something. And so like test it yourself first.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I always teach like newer consultants that, because they'll give stuff to me to review, like, oh, it's done. And I'm like, it's not done. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you missed this whole part. Like, did you even look at this and like compare it to the user story? Because it's clear you just built it and didn't review it before handing it off.
Well, but Liz, if I test it myself, that's going to take me another 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What else have you guys like missed on your checklist or wish you would have caught for go lives?
I say security is a big one that I always miss, like especially if you're adding a new table, you have to grant security to that table. So that's one that I miss. And then we also have just a really complex security structure at my company. We have a lot of field security profiles and we have, you know what I mean? So there's a lot to consider for us. And I've missed it so many times, even though I know I need to check it and it's always there. And then I somehow forget it, or like we have to create new security roles. And yeah, so it's fun.
Field security profile is really easy to forget about.
Yep.
Like there is no default. Like once it's turned on, like you have to grant access. It's not like people get read only by default or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I think internally we just did a deployment the last few days, and then today in our company meeting was like, oh, can you see this new table? I was like, no, I don't see anything. It's like, oh, whoops, got to add the security. Yep, happens to all of us.
Yeah,
because when I test as myself, and I'm an admin, right? So one of the biggest things that I've worked on for myself is testing as a test user for whoever this change is going to be. So I'd say that's probably also on my checklist, is like test not as yourself, like test as the person this is going to be for.
Yeah. Testing as a system admin doesn't really count as testing.
No, but I have to tell you, I spent years doing that, right? Because
it's easier too.
Well, you don't think about it, right? And so yeah, setting up that test user has been probably the biggest change I've made to my go live.
Yes.
That's a good point. Have a separate user that you can log in as, that you can change its security roles, and don't let it be an administrator. Yeah.
Yep. And make sure it's in the right business unit if you're using business units.
Yep.
And on the right teams if you're using teams.
It does. And I will say it adds time, right? Because you do have to look at like a person that you're trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? Like impersonate. Thank you. You have to compare that and you have to add them and stuff, but it's so worth the time. Like it's not even like a question anymore for me.
And it catches a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we have like
Yeah.
30 business units. And so I do a lot of like moving that test user around, and it's definitely saved me. What else do you guys think is like vital to have on your go live checklist?
Mine's like a super niche thing, but I just deployed mobile offline profiles for the first time, and they moved fine the first time when you moved a solution, and then they didn't. So we ended up manually recreating them, and I don't know if that was like a just us thing or a common problem, but it was just a manual thing, and it kind of like hosed up our existing solution, having them in there. And so those just are something I'll probably always do manually from now on, unless that whatever that was changes. But it was just a huge headache, and they're really tedious to set up too. So it was not fun setting those up repeatedly.
I wonder if there's other things that are like that. Like if there's like a list somewhere, if these things cannot be moved while in a solution.
There are some other things.
Did like, portal stuff not be able to used to be moved, but now it can?
Well, let's see, portal stuff is weird because most of your portal config is data, right? It's not configuration, it's actual data records. So yeah, I think like now you can move it, but it used to be much more difficult. There's other weird things like if you deactivate a bunch of views, like that doesn't transfer in a solution. So you have to deactivate all those views all over again. I feel like the thing that and this is an oldie but a goodie, is like the users or the lookup values in workflows or flows that are going to be different, like actual records between your production environment and your development environment. So after you move them, it'll be like, okay, cool, I moved all of these processes, but I have to go back into them and make sure that the lookups are actually like set properly to the thing that I want them to be set to.
Yep. Definitely had that happen before.
Yeah, and I used to have the duplicate detection rules. They turned off like anytime.
They don't do that anymore.
I was gonna say, I don't think they do that.
I don't know when they fixed that, but yeah, it was anytime you published a change to that table, they just turn off for that table.
Super fun, and then they take forever to turn back on.
Yeah, I've seen them like just freeze too in like a pending state before in environments.
Gotta love it.
I'm glad they don't turn off anymore though. When did they fix that?
You know, I think just at some point I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm like, hey, Liz, did you know this was there? And you're like, that's been there for like 6 months. I feel like it's probably one of those. Like,
but people would always forget to go turn them back on. And like, I can't tell you how many customers I'd like meet with, and they're like, our rules just are always off and we don't know why. And it's like, it's because someone published a change and they didn't go turn them back on. Like, it was just so easy to forget about.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll say one thing that I always forget, and I do make it part of my go live checklist now for myself, is we have an unmanaged solution layer in our production that our dev environments do not have. So
that you inherited, that's not
that I inherited.
Your design.
Yeah,
right?
that is not, oh my gosh. Yeah, if we started all over, that's not how it would be. Obviously, there was a change, and we've talked about this. There's a change in theory on managed and unmanaged solutions. So whatever I do in my sandbox is not always what it's going to look like in my production. So whenever I do like a go live, whenever I move anything, I always do it in a time where I can, like, nobody's in the system, so I can make sure, okay, this is how it's going to look. And then I can get myself prepared for training, because I don't want to make another unmanaged change in my production. So there are just some things I have to live with, which are really unfortunate. But I would say one of your items then should be is just check your unmanaged solution layer.
Seems like you just need to, move all those unmanaged things in production into managed solutions coming out of dev.
I thought I did, and I thought we have, Merlin. And if you want to look at it sometime, I'd love for you to, because I thought we did, but.
Well, just delete all the unmanaged solutions that are in production. Then you'll know what wasn't there.
And then we could talk about it, how it went.
Yeah, we can talk about how Ashley got fired because all this stuff got changed.
Export them first.
Sounds terrifying.
Set a backup.
I'd rather just do a copy. Yeah, I'd rather just do a copy to a different environment and try it.
Well, you could do that too.
Yeah.
See what breaks.
I feel like this always turns in. I think this always turns into like, what is Ashley doing wrong as an admin, and how can we fix it for her?
We're consulting. Sorry.
No, it just makes me laugh because it's like, I know, because it always makes me laugh because I'm like, these people have no idea what it's like to actually work like with the same end users every day over and over. Like, it's brutal.
No, you're right. You're right. I really don't.
Yeah.
That's
I just had this conversation with somebody. I was like, yeah, I've never actually been an admin. I've always been a consultant.
La-di-da.
I know.
I know, Liz and I do the same thing.
It's probably why, I don't even know. You don't know as much.
Could be. Or
All right,
my
well,
perception of internal administration is, what? You just wing it. That's what I always did with my systems. And then if something broke, I'd just be like,
Yeah,
oh,
'cause
sorry guys, hold on, I'll fix it.
you're not the front line of like wrath of angry end users that can like walk up to your cubicle and yell at you.
Yep.
I mean, they could. I'd just be like, hey, it's fine, I'll fix it. In my unmanaged layer in production.
See, that's, yep. Well, on that note, do you guys have any other items that people should consider?
I don't.
Yeah, don't take your advice from Merlin. Man, he's just been on a roll this one.
Don't take any advice from me, except do take my advice to make the checklist, because even people who are as experienced as the three of us still forget to do things if it's not on the checklist.
Very
If you're
true.
doing it manually, not in a solution in a lower environment, it probably needs to be on a checklist.
Yes, agreed. All right. Well, on that note, thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.